I'm there in spirit, and indeed have been monitoring bits and pieces of the conference all morning via the blogosphere and via the traces left on Twitter, which suggests something about the current state of civic media, that people are engaging with conferences like this one remotely as well as up close. Indeed, with that in mind, I thought I might open my comments by reading from one of the blogs that has gone up already about the conference by Noel McAfee, who wrote, "The presentations and videos this morning so far show how powerful and innovative new uses of media are, how they provide new content and perspectives for journalistic practice. I worry that the innovations begin to be seen as ends in themselves rather than as means for helping a public forum in the Deweyan sense. There's a profusion of content with a great deal of democratic potential, but the next step has to be to help people connect." And that's very much the spirit of what I wanted to talk to you about this morning, or this afternoon rather. I just got through running a first conference hosted by our Center for Future Civic Media at MIT, and I know some people in the audience there were part of the community we formed around that conference. And I think there's a struggle always at these conferences right now around the excitement about new technology and the challenges of constructing coherent social and cultural visions around that technology. It's something we're working with very much in the collaborations between Comparative Media Studies and the Media Lab as we think about what the future of civic media might look like. For me, I start with a very basic definition of media when I think about what one means by civic media. And I draw on Lisa Gittleman's work. Lisa Gittleman has told us that a media is both a technical platform and the social and cultural protocols that grow up around it. And for that reason, I think it's useful to draw a distinction between interactivity and participation, words that often get used interchangeably in discussions like this one. For me, interactivity is a property of the technology. It's built into the technical platform, and we can design tools which enable certain kinds of interactions. But participation emerges from the social and cultural side. It emerges from the community, and it has to do with what people choose to do with those technologies, how they use them on a grassroots level in the context of their own lives. And so much of my work, while excited and fueled by the availability of new technical platforms, is very much interested in the social and cultural practices that are growing up around those platforms. And that's why I end up talking a great deal about participatory culture. We're in a moment where certainly new technologies have lowered the cost of production of media and also lowered the cost of distribution of media, making it possible for many more people to participate in generating content. And the result is a kind of diversification of our culture at the very moment that we're seeing a narrowing of media ownership. And the tension between those two tendencies, I think, is something we're still struggling to understand. But it's not just the technologies that are enabling it, it's also the fact that people are acquiring new social skills and cultural competencies in deploying those technologies, which is an important part of understanding the changes that are taking place. Among that is a growing understanding of social networking and collective intelligence, the ability to coordinate our dispersed efforts through these tool sets to allow distance collaboration for large numbers of people to work together to achieve goals that would have been absolutely impossible for individuals to achieve, or even individual organizations to achieve a short while ago. The result is that we're seeing civic media flowing from the bottom up as well as top down, and that has some impact on not just commercial media, but also public broadcasting as we've understood it. And we might point, for example, to the very central role that YouTube has been playing in this current presidential election cycle, a topic that I write about in an updated edition of Convergence Culture. It's coming out very soon, but I'm very interested in the ways that the kind of fusion, the hybrid media environment that YouTube offers, where it's not simply amateur and commercial, but as Yochai Winkler would point out to us, also nonprofit, educational, governmental organizations, which are deploying YouTube as a platform to get their messages out and to engage in civic dialogue. Some of which looks like the kinds of civic dialogue created by traditional journalism or by public broadcasting, some of which is altogether much more playful and barely political, to borrow a phrase from the Obama Girl campaign. But what's fascinating is the deeper we look at the so-called viral content that's circulating, the more we see it's often emerging out of formal and informal partnerships between totally amateur individual groups or things like fan communities on the one hand, and traditional nonprofit or civic-oriented organizations on the other. And it's that hybrid media form that interests me and I find most enthusiastic about the present moment, that there is this opportunity for new alliances between nonprofit groups and grassroots communities. An example I like to talk about is the example of Four-Eyed Monsters, an independent film which has largely gained what visibility it has on the back of courting consumers through the web, through the use of screenings and publicity in Second Life, through the use of publicity via blogs and video podcasts, and through encouraging people to take ownership over the film and to rally in the local community to try to get the film shown in their own area. And I think that's a great example of this kind of merging of top-down or traditional media production, in this case independent media production, with grassroots energy. As we look at it, though, I think nonprofit or public broadcasting groups need to look at some of the same economic and ethical issues that are starting to confront Web 2.0 companies. That is, this whole debate about free labor, which has started to emerge in the last couple of years, has relevance to us, not simply in terms of uncompensated labor, that is, this whole joke about Web 2.0, that we produce the content, they make all the money. In the nonprofit sector, no one makes any of the money, but there is often can be a sense of consumer-driven content feeling like it's been manipulated or exploited by traditional organizations, which really are seeking ways to save money by outsourcing creative production. But at a deeper level, the question of free labor cuts to what I call the participation gap, which is who gets to participate in citizen-driven media, who gets to be part of the participatory culture. And this has to do, first of all, which groups have surplus time to contribute. If, there's a kind of luxury about being able to create free labor and share it with either a nonprofit or commercial entity. Activism has long been something that attracts the middle class and the upper classes simply because they have enough freedom and control over the structure of their time to be able to participate. The second question would be which groups have the skills needed to participate. This is the core of what I call the participation divide, which is very different from participation gap, which is very different from what I call the digital divide. The participation gap has to do with cultural and social opportunities, the ability to acquire skills through participation, rather than simply the question of technical access to digital resources. And so at the present time, we're seeing real differences in access technologically feeding into real differences in access and skills. And so many people who might represent the underrepresented sections of our society simply lack access to the skills and competencies needed to fully participate in the new participatory culture. Third, the question about is which groups feel empowered to participate. The research has long shown that if art museums open themselves up to the public for free, it still tends to be the middle class and upper middle class who go because the art museum feels like a sanctified space. It feels like a space only some people are entitled to step into. And I think there's a danger that participatory culture becomes exclusionary in spirit, if not in fact, its attitude, that people perceive themselves as not empowered to participate, and that affects the diversity of where stuff comes from. And then finally, if we imagine some sort of new hybrid where content is partially supported through financial contributions from the public, then do we face an economic barrier yet again to participation? Who can afford to contribute money or pay for content that might represent diversity? So all of that I think becomes really important as we think about what's the model. That is, as exciting as it may seem to funnel content from a do-it-yourself ethos and to create content at a much lower cost, we still have a ways to go before we achieve the goal of diversity. The last question on that is which content gets filtered out. That is, if we live in a world of YouTube or Dig, where there's a majoritarian impulse that determines what content is valuable, research by people like John McMurray has shown us that the content that rises at the top tends to be that which reflects the lifestyle and perspectives of white middle-class consumers over that of other groups who may have the ability to produce media, may share media within their own community through something like YouTube, but lack the ability to push it to the top. So as I started thinking about these problems, the book that I've been reading lately that I think has mattered the most to me is actually a classic in our field, Lewis Hyde's The Gift, Creativity and the Artist in the Modern Age. And I don't have time to go into all of the details here, but Hyde describes there the so-called gift economy, an economy that operates off free exchange of goods governed by notions of reciprocity and social obligation. And I think there's a lot, I've been doing work lately thinking about how the gift economy contrasts with the commodity culture that governs Web 2.0 companies, but I think we also want to think about how that gift economy may differ from the motives and structures which have shaped public media in the past. Whether it's in governmental agencies or nonprofit organizations, they still work on very different principles from the decentered, fragmented, voluntaristic, socially bound communities that are involved in producing media on their own in the web environment. A lot, as we think about economic models, we have to think about an economic model which is not governed by money per se, but is governed by social currency, is governed by the sort of the sense of mutual support and benefit, which follows a different logic. And what we're going to see, yet again, is a hybrid of those models as we think about what's moving forward for civic media in the next decade. So I'll close my remarks there.
Henry, I don't know if you can hear us, but thanks again for joining us.
Happy to do it.
Okay, thanks.